So this guy, Senk Uyghur, I don't know how to say his name, but I've now added him to the list of people that I think it's worth listening to, even if he might be wrong on politics compared to me. He's on the left. But anyone who mentions World Trade Center 7 and brings attention to it is on the right side of history as far as I'm concerned.
Israel, if they run out of interceptor missiles for Iron Dome, cannot countenance any of their people dying. They think, no, war, we murder everyone else, but we don't lose almost anyone, right? So if Iran can actually penetrate their defenses, they're going to have their finger on the nuke like instantly. They're like the most trigger happy people. In fact, the other day, Netanyahu said, our fingers on the trigger, right? But they don't want to be blamed for it. So they're now doing propaganda in America, again, including a Mark Levin segment on Fox News where they're like, sometimes you got to use nukes. So they're trying to get America to
But
use
hold on,
the
Mark
nuke.
Levin said that. Mark Levin said
Yes, yes. So they're now doing propaganda so that America uses a nuke instead of Israel. So we get blamed for it and not Israel. So in fact, today, Larry Johnson, you take it with a grain of salt. I don't know if I could vouch for the guy or not, but he's former CIA.
Considering all the other insane things Israel does, yes, I'm certain there's some people in Israel who want to use nukes. And they might be trying to convince Trump to use the nukes. I don't think we're anywhere near that point yet. I think it would first escalate conventionally before it went that direction.
And you talked to him recently. I saw that. And Larry Johnson said today that he's hearing reports that General Dean Cain stood up to Trump, that Trump was actually talking about the nuclear codes when he was in a rage. And General Cain said, no, we're not going to do that. That's illegal, and we're not going to do it. And they had a huge shouting match. Again, I don't know the veracity of it, but that's what Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst, is saying today. So now, again, all of this is going to be, we're going to find out about all of it, right? So if I'm wrong and Trump stands up to Israel, then maybe the nuke thing was not true, and the Catholic Church thing is just Trump getting mad at Leo for insulting his war, etc. So, okay, but if we continue the war or we put in ground troops, we do those maniacal things that are obviously 100% against America's interest, and we continue this war.
Yes, if it goes back to a live shooting war, then yes, the fear of them using nukes comes back. But at very least, this is one thing we can breathe a sigh of relief for. There's a ceasefire now. And going from a ceasefire directly to dropping nukes is, I think, a 0% chance. It'll first be a very intense conventional bombing campaign, at the very least. So we're at least a week away, a minimum, from the use of nukes, even in the worst case scenario, which is a good place to be rather than where we were before the ceasefire, where there's people actively talking about when Israel might use nukes. If Iranian missiles are raining down on Israeli cities, then as long as that's happening, there is the danger that maybe the damage is worse than we've heard about because of the censorship, and Israel might be even closer to using nukes, and you actually have to worry about it. As long as missiles aren't flying, yeah, nukes are off the table for at least now.
Then I was right, and Israel controls literally everything.
If I'll tell you this, if what breaks the ceasefire with Israel, with Iran, is Israeli aggression in Lebanon, then I'll give it to you. If that's what happens, and the ceasefire with Lebanon that happened when we saw the power struggle there, we saw how when the deal happened, Cenk, and then the Pakistanis said Lebanon was included, everything was fine. I remember that day very well. And then the next day you wake up and suddenly Trump is like, oh, no, it's not included. And people in his administration said the same thing. Lebanon's not included. And then Netanyahu said the same thing. It was pretty clear that Netanyahu gave a call for Trump, and then told him to take Lebanon out. But then when a few days later, a Lebanese ceasefire happened, to me, that's an indicator to Israeli influence over the US is wavering under Trump. Again, I hope I'm right, because I could be completely wrong. People could clip this and use it against me. Depends on what happens next. But I'm really hoping.
That might be it, but I actually was saying back then that, Trump would get a ceasefire in Lebanon because he just say you just do it temporarily. It doesn't mean that Trump reined Netanyahu in permanently. I think he just needs to say, I need you to just stop for now in Lebanon to try to get the Strait of Hormuz open. And that's, I think, what happened. And it failed because Trump imposed a blockade. And that blockade was justification for Iran not opening the straits. So straits have been closed the entire time, basically. in any case, I'm not convinced that the ceasefire in Lebanon is evidence that Trump has control over Netanyahu, because if I was Netanyahu, I know that the current ceasefire and negotiations are doomed to failure. I'm in a position to torpedo them myself. And so why not throw Trump a bone, stop things temporarily in Lebanon, take a chance to re-equip and whatever. And then when the negotiations fall apart, then you start bombing Lebanon again. It's as long as Trump's position and the Iranian position are as far apart as they are, Netanyahu doesn't really even have to worry about the negotiation, because there's no hope of Trump ever getting anything. So, like, Trump extended the ceasefire, but I don't know if they're even talking. And very soon, Lebanon could explode into war again.
Hopeful that this time around Israel bit off more than they could chew.
So last two things here, Mario. One, what I don't want though is we scuttle the deal. We make these maximalist demands just to make sure that the war continues, and then we bomb the hell out of them, or we do ground troops, and then people come back and go, "Oh no, it wasn't Israel's fault. It was Iran's fault." No, Iran wants peace, and so
Yeah.
Okay.
Look, I don't know. I wouldn't.
I'll have to contradict you on this. Sink. I'm going to call you Sink. I don't know if that's right. Some in Iran want peace. Some in Iran don't want peace. Some on Iran want a Trump loss, and they want that so that Iran has peace. But I'm being joking. But for Iran not to be attacked again, for it to not have to worry that every 6 months the United States is going to come back and bomb them, they need to inflict a loss on Trump that is seen by the entire world as a loss. And to do that, the war can't end yet. 2 months of the Strait of Hormuz closing is not enough damage yet to guarantee a Trump loss. No, I think, honestly, maybe 1 or 2 more months. I've said at the beginning, 6 months might be what they need. That guaranteed. 6 months, that's an absolute Iranian victory. But I think 3 or 4 months, that might be enough in itself to doom Republicans in the midterms and get Trump impeached and removed from power. 3 or 4 months of Strait of Hormuz closing. And until that happens, I think there's some in Iran that aren't really interested in peace. They want to keep the Hormuz closed until they've established deterrence. And like, if you try to attack us again, we'll close Strait of Hormuz and you'll go through this again. So I think there's people in Iran who aren't interested in peace yet.
Give that much credit to the IRGC. The IRGC are a lot less keen than the executive branch. There's not like one voice in Iran.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, but that's because I think
never listened. I think look,
Right.
the IRGC is not as level-headed as the executive.
Actually, I think the IRGC is extremely level-headed in that what the civilian leadership is doing is they're not thinking, they're willing to give Trump some type of victory. They're willing to, even if it's optical. The IRGC understands that for the security of Iran, Trump needs to lose. He needs a loss. Like that, no U.S. president ever thinks about attacking Iran again. And that, I think, is a more logical position, the IRGC. They are in this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to inflict a loss on the United States, because Trump started this war without a plan to deal with the closure of Strait of Hormuz. And that gives them such a strategic advantage to just agree to reopen it for nothing, like the civilian leadership apparently did, is just insane. You keep that closed until you negotiated the agreement you want on Iranians' terms, because the pressure from it is just so incredible on the world economy and on Trump.
Guys are Arachi and all them, the president and the speaker of the parliament, but at the same time, they're not, warmongers that all they want is war. Now, how? Because they're emboldened by this win. How demanding will they be in the negotiations? Time will tell. But I know they want peace, but not as much as they did before this war. Before this war, they would do anything to avoid a war with the US. Now they know they have the upper hand with the Strait of Hormuz. So their mindset is very different.
Every day the Strait remains closed, they get closer to victory. I said 6 months absolute victory, but even 3 or 4 months, and I think that's 3 months. Honestly, 3 months might be enough. to guarantee Republican defeat in midterms. I feel safer with 4 months, but like 3 months is the earliest I realistically see this conflict. It's a long shot, but somewhere between 3 and 4 months, 3 and 6 months is when I think the straits will open and this conflict will end and Trump will surrender to Iran.
But we'll see. I do still
Yeah.
think they prefer peace. I still believe that.
Okay, so last thing is this. So is it wild and outrageous to think that Israel controls the U.S. government? No. For example, Big Pharma, do they control the U.S. government? 100%.
Influence. Are you?
It's not influence. It's
Control is a big
100%
word,
control.
It's a huge word, man. Control. You say controlling the world,
Control.
peace, democracy, and military. That's
Yes.
a huge word to use.
Yes. So guys, this is not complicated. So how do the big drug companies control our drug policy? Well, they bribe almost all of Congress. In America, bribery is legal. It's called campaign contributions.
It's
and they
true.
literally give hundreds of millions of dollars, in fact, billions of dollars as a lobby. So we all
Legal corruption.
see with our own eyes, we can't even negotiate drug prices here. That's the craziest thing in the world. In a free market, they
That's
destroyed
mental.
our free market, and the Republicans helped them do it. Why? Because of the bribery, not complicated. Same exact thing is true of the Israeli
Why are you mentioning the military-industrial complex that benefits the most from this war, more than Israel, more than anyone?
Oh,
Hasn't
yeah,
even been mentioned
absolutely.
once.
No,
They
the
have more
military-
influence, they
that's-
have more
I'm-
influence than the Israeli lobby when
No,
it comes
no,
to
no.
wars like this.
Yeah, Mario, you're not wrong about that. The military-industrial complex is a huge part of this. When I normally talk about on the Young Turks, I mention big oil, military-industrial complex, big pharma, APAC. Now, what mainstream media says is,
The Uniparty. Yep. The bribed individuals.
oh, yeah, we see it in big oil, military-industrial, big pharma, but not Israel. You're all anti-Semites. No. It's the same exact concept. Bribery. And who was the number one briber of our Congress in the last election cycle? Normally, it's big pharma. This time, it was APAC. APAC gave over $127 million to our politicians to bribe them and control them, and they get exactly what they bargained for. And all those people that are bribed by the Israeli lobby, just like the people bribed by the drug companies in the military-industrial complex, all vote for Israel 100% of the time. And on top of that, do they have blackmail on super important leaders
Probably.
like Trump? Well, that is certainly possible. They had blackmail on Bill Clinton. They knew about Monica Lewinsky, and Netanyahu threatened Bill Clinton with it in order to get Jonathan Pollard, the traitor, pardon. So that literally happened. We know that already. We know that the Israelis are constantly spying on us. They stole our top secrets with Jonathan Pollard. They stole our nuclear secrets, and none of them, and the guy who stole our nuclear secrets is Ghislaine Maxwell's dad, and we never even tried to arrest him. Why does that happen if they don't have significant leverage over our
Yep.
leaders? So, and by the way, Epstein,
No, it's not just significant leverage over the leader. Because what Senk is ignoring here is the media. His control over leaders would mean nothing if we had a free media. Because every time someone was bribed and then voted a specific way and it was obvious, media would report on it, it would hurt him politically, and that would more than wipe out whatever contributions was given to him. Or like he's saying, these Israeli spies that stole some stuff from us. If that was given the wide and serious coverage it deserves in mainstream media, there would be enough outrage at anyone involved in allowing that to happen that it would devastate them politically. The reason it can go on, the reason there can be this control of our U.S. government is because the media doesn't function as it should. A non-functioning media allows all these bribing to take place because the consequences of bribe, it be beyond legal. The immediate consequence normally is scandal, media coverage, your reputation being tanked. But that normally always happens before any criminal proceedings. It's the first step of normally this investigative journalist uncovers this corruption thing, and the whole world learns about it, how awful it is, and then later on there might be prosecutions. The media is the biggest, it is what needs to actually be controlled to allow our Congress to be as corrupt as it is. And it is. Media is completely controlled by deep state.
every deal he did was on behalf of Israel. So that's also now proven. So, the guy who was videotaping all the most powerful people, the guy who partied with Donald Trump for decades and who worked for Israel, he can't have blackmail on Trump. Why can't he? That is a very, very real possibility. And that blackmail might be so nuclear that Trump thinks, I'll do anything to make sure that doesn't get out. I don't care if hundreds of thousands of people die. I don't care if Americans die. I don't care what happens, but I am not going to let that tape.
I still don't believe that there is this nuclear level blackmail material on Trump. Just because they would have used it in 2016. They would have used it in 2020 if they had it. Absolutely guaranteed it. If it's in the hands of Israel, it's in the hands of the deep state. And to prevent Trump from winning, they would have used it. 100%. And so that's why I don't believe it exists. It did, or at least it existed back in 2016 or 2020. They might have been created since then. Deep fake videos of Trump, I don't know. But I believe it's another combination that's being used to control Trump. Like, just control the people around him. Convincing him that Iran was trying to assassinate him. Lots of other little things. But I don't think they have blackmail material on Trump. And I don't think Trump would just go along with being blackmailed. I could be wrong, but everything I know about how deep state operates, it doesn't hold back. That's one way thing it does. It never holds back. It uses every dirty trick it can whenever it can. And so, do you think to believe this thing that there's actually Epstein files on Trump, you have to believe that the deep state held back and could have stopped Trump from winning in 2016, but didn't. Could have even more determined the outcome of 2020 even more decisively with releasing this dirt on Trump, but didn't. No, I don't believe Trump was among the Pizzagate crowd.
Tape come out. Is that possible? Of course it's possible.
Is it
So
likely?
we're going to
No,
find out if it's true or not, depending on his actions.
As far as I know, Pollard as well was not pardoned by Bill Clinton. There was a lot
Mhm.
of pressure to pardon him, but he served his full 30 years and then was released
So
under
that's a good
Bill
point.
Clinton.
Yeah, it's a good point, Mario. Let me clarify. So he pressured Clinton, but since that became public, Clinton didn't do Pollard. Obama eventually pardoned Pollard, and then but he
fine.
wasn't allowed to leave America. And then Trump said he can leave America, and then the Adelsons, his number one donor to Trump, came
That's
and
a
flew him
sick
out in a
story.
private.
That's a-
Yeah, that's a sick story. And you're hearing it from this guy, the guy who also mentioned World Trade Center 7. In other words, he's willing to talk about all these topics that are taboo in mainstream media. And he's saying a sick story, and they're concentrating on how bad it is that these presidents pardoned him and everything. But that only happened because the media didn't. Do you remember the media criticizing Obama for that or covering it at all? No? Well, that's why it happened, because the media is controlled. For the not 100%, but like 90% controlled. So for Clinton, that 10% he got out, and some people heard about it, so Clinton didn't do it. But for Obama, that time there were no one covered the story, and so they just pardoned this guy that should have never have been pardoned.
Good.
sick story. That is a sick story. That
And
honestly,
they
that
celebrate
story
him like a
alone-
hero in Israel. The
is
Miriam
so
Adelsons and
You
celebrating.
know, Cenk, do you know countries like if that happened in China or Russia, this guy would spend life in prison?
He'd probably be executed.
Yeah,
But right now,
executed.
not only is he in Israel having the time of his life and being
Fuck about
feted
him,
by
really.
being feted by the Adelsons and all the pro-Israel donors here in America, love that he betrayed America. That's why they're like folks who don't understand how Israel works, like they're not like neutral to America. They're actively robbing us of our secrets, of our treasure, of money that hundreds of billions of dollars we've given them, and they think we're suckers and they make fun of us behind our back. Not just the Israelis, but people who support Israel in America who give endless money to bribe our politicians. And what they did with Pollard was unconscionable. That's rubbing it in our face. We love that that Pollard betrayed you. And Pollard's out there now in Israel.
Yeah, the problem, Israel, it's part of the deep state, but it's not the core. The core is the U.S. Treasury, the ETF, Exchange Stabilization Fund, ESF. Got the acronyms. I need to say it more. ESF. I'm not sure the people in Israel realize that the United States is doomed to collapse, and so and Israel's fate is tied to the United States. So that means Israel's fated to collapse too, because I think Israel has burned too many bridges, earned too many grudges to survive after the U.S. abandons it, which will happen when the dollar collapses. And it'll either be a shadow of its former self and have to give up huge amount of territory, or it will cease to exist altogether as people just flee the region. One or the other. But it has no future. So all these people being arrogant, it makes me think of Madoff's auditors. That Madoff ran a Ponzi scheme, and he had an auditor that helped cover up the fraud. But that auditor also had all his money invested in Madoff, into the Ponzi scheme, and lost everything when the Ponzi scheme collapsed. So that's how I think of Israel. Yes, they're involved in the deep state, and they may be laughing and whatever, but they're going to go down with the deep state when it collapses, and they're not really going to understand fully what happened, but they're going to get screwed. And in a way, this Iran war is the beginning of that happened. United States turned out to be a whole lot less powerful than probably people in Israel expected. And that decline is part of the collapse of the United States empire and the dollar and the treasury market. And it's so, yeah, there's not going to be a good end for Israel. How bad, that remains to be seen, but this is still like 5 years off at least. The dollar needs to collapse first, but Israel, at least in its current form, is not going to be around forever.
Saying, hey, you know, all the Jews in America should betray America and serve Israel just like I did. So that's a super damaging thing for Jews in America. Don't say crap like that, because a regular Jewish American didn't ask for any of this. Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, not everyone can flee. Yeah, there are a lot of dual citizens though in Israel, and a good chunk of them can flee. And for the ones that can't, well, a lot of people in Gaza couldn't flee either.
Okay, they're not linked to IDF. They're not linked to Mossad. And in fact, 63, do you never hear this in the media? 63% of Jewish Americans support Israel, but are against the current Israeli government. The majority of Jewish Americans are against Netanyahu's government, but every time Israel is criticized, some liar on cable news like Dana Bash or Jake Tapper will say, oh, everyone is an anti-Semite. Well, are a great majority of Jews in America anti-Semites? No, this is all propaganda on behalf of Israel. So we're all going to find out in a couple of days whether America is a sovereign, independent country, or if Israel completely controls our foreign policy. My guess is they completely control our foreign policy, and we will be driven deeper into this war because Israel wants it, even though it's greatly damaging to America. So we're all going to find out.
At this point, the only good outcome for Israel, or what they would regard as a good outcome, is the use of nukes. Because it's obvious that conventional weaponry won't do anything against Iran. And only way to disintegrate the country and actually maybe get them to surrender would be the large-scale use of nukes. So there's probably going to be those in Israel that want that to happen. That said, it's been a long time since World War II, and not once has a nation ever used nukes, like, again, in war. There's a huge taboo with that, because there's a lot of people that understand just how terrible nukes are. And I think it'll be very hard for Israel or the United States to use nukes. There'll be a lot of people that are willing to bomb the hell out of Gaza, for example, but dropping a nuke on Gaza, that'd be too far. Yeah, there's that level. Nukes have that aura of evil about them that a lot of people just don't want to be the one that turned part of the Middle East into a contaminated zone for millions of years. No. So I'm still hopeful that nukes won't be used, but I recognize there is the danger. That danger exists.
Together, and there won't be any more excuses. And I don't want to hear anybody talking about, well, maybe they were a slight influence. No, they're the influence. And so now it's going to be very obvious either way.
Unless the war has ended and Israel gets
then it's obvious
to
that I'm
Lebanon,
wrong.
they don't get what they want. But then, not you're wrong, but you might have been right, but the tide is.
The war, Trump is still talking about how he won. As long as he's that logic, as long as he still claims that he won the Iran war, there's no hope for peace. Because that means he's still making maximalist demands that Iran is going to reject outright. And that means things will just remain in limbo with the closure of Strait of Hormuz damaging the world economy continuously until that pain forces basically Trump to give up and surrender. So that is the least bad outcome, that we remain in limbo until economic pain forces Trump to surrender. Second, slightly worse than that is the idea that Trump, out of desperation, tries to restart the war and drop bombs. And then a good part of the Middle East, if not all of it, will go up in flames. And the world economy is shot for the next 3 years, completely fucked. And the still worse, even less likely and more horrific is the idea of nukes getting deployed and this escalating to World War III.
Shifting maybe sooner than you would have expected, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Thanks to people like yourself. That's thanks to people like yourself that have been bringing attention to these matters. You know, I didn't know about Jonathan Pollard till, you know, about a year ago, when you guys have been covering it for years. And that's just, it was such a sickening story. It's such a sad story to see happen to the world's biggest democracy, to the defender of freedom and liberty. It was.
Oh, you think that's sad? You knew everything I knew about what's happened to the world's biggest democracy. It just doesn't even faze me. It's not even top 10 of things that are bad. I mean, we used to own, what is it? 2/3 of the world's manufactured good we used to produce at the end of World War II. We like 80% of the world's gold or something insane like that was in the United States, under United States control at one point in time. It's like 0% today. Our banks used to be the strongest in the world in terms of their balance sheets, and now they're carcasses. They're zombie banks that being propped out by government guarantees and bailouts and low interest rates. And our military, shadow its former self too. Like just during the Iraq War 20 years ago, we had five aircraft carriers deployed around Iraq to support that operation. Today, we can barely manage 3. We are an empire in decline. And that's not even going into all the deep state stuff that's been done to the American people, which I won't go into right now.
It's just so sad. Like if I said, well, what are the biggest disasters that Israel has brought to the world, is number 1 Gaza by far, number 2 probably Lebanon now, Syria close 3, and probably Syria 4.
I'd say the genocides of Christians in Syria would definitely be number 1. Yeah, that's a million people, Christians, just disappeared. Yeah, that's worse than Gaza. That's worse than everything else.
And the US 3 just hijacked the American system and took advantage of the American system, just like other lobbying groups have, for the benefit of their country, which is fine, but to a certain level. And they've just gone way, way too far, especially recently. But you saw that Jesus statue as well, man. That was, I know it's one soldier, doesn't represent the entire army.
Yeah, in the name of a democracy, we blew up bridges, blew up schools, killed doctors around the world to destabilize governments and fight communism, and in the name of democracy, and dollarize the world. All these places, strangely, where we did all these horrible things, like in Iran-Contra, in Nicaragua, they used the US dollar at the end of it because we'd destroyed so much of the government and trust in society in those places that their currency had collapsed and they were using the dollar. Yeah, and we did that around the world, completely fucked over countries until they were so destabilized, their currency collapsed and they used the dollar. That was how we dollarized the world. That was Iran-Contra.
You know, one after the other, it stacks up.
Yeah. So, Mario, super last thing on that. So, and it certainly doesn't represent Jewish Americans who, like, literally out of the hundreds that I know, not one of them thinks that they're chosen people. It's absurd, right? But are there fundamentalist Jews in Israel who believe that? Oh, absolutely. Are they all over the IDF? Absolutely. Are they all over the Israeli cabinet? Absolutely.
Yes.
And those Israeli religious fundamentalists that are both terrorists in nature and they are supremacists in nature. They despise Muslims and Christians, and they think that they're above all of us, and they act like it. The fact that
they even think they're above other Jews. the Jews that aren't on board with the Zionism, yeah, they hate those two.
Not one soldier. The IDF soldiers do it again and again. Tonight on the Young Turks at 6 o'clock Eastern on YouTube, we're going to show you clips of them mocking Christians in doing a wedding ceremony inside a church that they bombed, another
Yeah, I saw
church
that.
they bombed somewhere else. They constantly are bombing churches. They're fighting, killing Armenian Christians in southern Lebanon as we speak. There's 2 million Christians in Lebanon. They don't give
Yes.
a damn. They'll bomb your churches, etc. So, like, a lot of Jewish Americans don't realize how radical Israel has become, both the government and the culture. So, yeah, us funding terrorism.
Yeah, has become. You're assuming that it hasn't always been that way. I'd argue that with media, since COVID, there's been a whole new movement in media. Like the alternative media has so much more power today. I'd argue you're just hearing a lot more about it than you did in the past. That it's always been this radical.
Against Christians and Muslims is insanity. It's insanity. So it shouldn't, no one should take it as this is their representative of all Jews, because that's literally, according to polling, not remotely true. But yes, there are
I mean, even back during Israel's creation, they exterminated the indigenous population in certain regions of now Israel with machine guns and just mowed down people in order to establish Israel. And so, yeah, that type of extremist has been there the entire time. It's not just become that way. It's always been that way.
very nefarious forces inside the Israeli government who have done great terrorism. And Mario, as bad as Gaza and Lebanon and all of those tragedies are, as an American,
And just 2011 is when they were funding ISIS in Syria to genocide Christians. That's already 15 years ago. So in terms of them being crazy and bad, that's, yeah, it's been like that forever.
I can't help but put at number one that they've stolen our sovereignty from us. I mean, the whole point of America is supposed to be freedom, and they've taken that freedom away from us. And so that's why I'm saying, like, if we don't go further into the war in Europe,
Yeah, that's a good, interesting point. To me, the genocide of Christians in Syria is worse than that, just because it's 1 million people and 1 million Christians dying. Consider that worse. But yeah, them stealing our sovereignty, yeah, is also bad.
you're right, at least you could know that that they don't have complete control, and that their influence is waning, going down, right?
Yeah.
Just like every other aspect of the deep state is losing control, like losing control in Ukraine. That's not going as planned. Trump winning again was not the plan. The plan was a bullet in his head. Yeah, in all types of ways. Like the story that broke today about the SPLC, that getting revealed as being a sham and a fraud. That wasn't according to plan. The deep state is just collapsing. Slowly, everything, all its networks of controls are unraveling, and more is getting exposed. Pizzagate has been exposed. Epstein stuff that's already been released in the Epstein files, all that information is out there. It's losing control, and there's still a lot to be uncovered.
So that's what
Yeah, because we haven't, even with everything gone so far, we haven't begun to touch on what's gone on with our financial system and currency, the real heart of the matter. Because that could bring down the financial system. And the Depository Trust Corporation, that's like something like World Trade Center 7 that no one has heard about and knows about. But one day you're going to hear about that. One day, within our lifetime, within the next 10 years probably, you're going to hear that name, Depository Trust Corporation. And it's going to be in the context of, you thought you owned stocks? Well, no, it's actually Depository Trust Corporation that owns your stocks. You own nothing. And financial system collapse, and yeah, you don't own any stocks. You have nothing. That's the context you're going to find out about the Depository Trust Corporation.
everybody's rooting for. Everybody knows that's rational, knows they have a tremendous influence on America. The only question is it complete control or influence that can go down, right? And that's what I mean by what we're about to find out. Because if the war stops, then that's true, and you're right? But if the war doesn't stop, that means complete control, because no one in America wants this war, and it'll do grave economic damage and more damage to our troops. More people will get killed, more damage to our allies. Literally, no one wants this war outside of Israel. So if we keep going, you know for a fact who's in charge of America.
All right, that was a fun video. This will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.